What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 2 prop live stream for the Charles Schwab Challenge. Gotta quickly get you guys ready for all your exposure tomorrow with a look at the weather report, some of the averages from round 1, get you situated with what to expect, and then afterwards we'll go through the Underdog and Prize Picks boards, give you an idea of how to attack the different prop categories, as well as any props down in the live chat that you guys want me to deep dive specifically. But feel free to go ahead and let me know in any case. We got Joseph down there, always early to these live streams, always a great sight down there in the chat. We also got Jack down there as well, says, how are we? Doing swell over here on a Thursday. We ended up about 5 units into the profit over with our showdown slips. We went 1 of 2 for today. So while it wasn't 2 of 2, a full sweep across the board, we did have profit at least if you guys tailed all the slips from the stream. And of course, for my exposure, everything on top of the live stream hit. I didn't have any other props miss other than that Hughes and Aldrich pot guider slip that we had there together. And luckily, sometimes you get all your misses consolidated and the rest of the board can be a sweep. So that's what we had today. Ended up being a massive day of profit. And on Sunday last week, it was about a 6 profit unit day there too. So over the last 2 slates, we're up 11 units cumulatively. In fact, almost 12 units altogether. So a great last 2 slates. So trying to make it 3 in a row for about 5 units plus. Let's try and get after it. We got Chandler Phillips and Taylor Moore when you get a chance. You're saying for deep dives? We'll do that later on then, Jack. We're going to focus on the golf course first, some pin locations and whatnot. And you'll have to tell me what the deep dive, because if you're here for fantasy stuff, you should have showed up to the other live stream and asked that. In fact, you were at the other live stream, Jack. So yeah, if you're asking fantasy stuff, why didn't you ask it then, man? You were on the live stream for that. Let's talk about these averages. So today it played 0.36 over par, which was a hair easier than what you had for last year, which was what we were expecting because conditions weren't all that windy. It was going to get a little bit windier in the afternoon, and that's exactly what we saw. If you take a look at the morning versus the afternoon, it was about 0.55 shots harder towards the PM wave. In the morning side of things, it only played like 0.1 over par. So about even par for the first half, about 0.5 to 0.6 over par in the afternoon. And the birdie and bogey averages also swayed in either direction, right? Morning wave had slightly more birdies and also slightly less bogeys or worse, whereas the afternoon wave, it went in the other direction. You had slightly more bogeys or worse being made per round than birdies are better. Hence, why the scoring average was about a half a stroke difference. And you can see towards the bottom here, the fairway and greens aren't available quite yet because the database that I use the averages from haven't updated quite yet. It's actually the first time that that's ever happened. Data Golf is normally where I pull those stats from, and they aren't allowing me to download the sheet quite yet. So when I'm able to do so later, I'll be able to find the fairway and the green rates. But considering the scoring average was just a hair easier than what we had in 2024, you'd have to think that the fairway rate might be slightly higher than what we had that year, and that the green rate was probably 0.5 to 1 higher as well. So last time around, it was closer to like 10 and a half greens per round. Wouldn't surprise me when we get the GIR rate a little bit later on if it was closer to 11, if not even just slightly over 11 per round. And considering that overnight they're expected to get quite a bit of rain, you're not going to see it on this HRRR forecast, but if you look at some of the other local weather models, they're calling for about a 1/4 of an inch of rain, which doesn't sound like a ton, but with how firm and fast the golf course was running, that 1/4 inch of rain is really going to help the players in the morning. That combined with the low winds, sub 5 miles an hour for most of the time there, is I think going to be the hot pocket for scoring. And pin locations would be the one factor on top of that we don't have quite yet. But assuming the pin locations are neutral compared to round number 1, scoring average in the morning might even be about even par, slightly under par because of the extra rain that they got. And if it's an easier set of pins, right, it could be a 1/4 to even a half a stroke under par scoring average. Now, if it's a hard setup, maybe it still plays over par, even with the slightly easier setup. But when you have a super firm golf course and you get any bit of moisture, it's going to make a pretty big difference out there. So if they get a bunch of rain, that would even further impact that scoring. But they're not expected to get a whole bunch overnight, just a little bit of a drizzle, which will soften up the golf course early. But because they're not expected to get like a 1/2 inch to an inch of rain, that PM wave, it's going to be dried out by then. And you kind of saw that today if you guys watched the golf on the course. The course got firmer and faster as the day went on. And I think you're going to see that same kind of effect for round number 2. So if you're going to take your positive stance plays, it's the same thing we mentioned for Thursday. It's going to be the same kind of blueprint for round number 2. You take your positive stance plays early. What I mean by positive stance play, by the way, if you're maybe new to the PGA prop streets, is under on strokes. So guys would maybe shoot under par if they're at 70.5. Even par would be a 70. This is a par 70 golf course, just in case you didn't have that nugget quite yet. And also by positive stance play, you might mean over on birdies, maybe an over on greens or over on fairways. A player to do well is what we mean by positive stance play. And then on the flip side, if you're going to try and fade players or take a negative stance play, would be the other way to describe that, would be the afternoon wave tee times would be where you'd want to look, because that's when the course is going to get a little bit crispier, harder to hold some of those green complexes. You're going to see the green regulation rate drop as the day goes on, and that's going to impact scoring. Birdie rates are going to go down a little bit as it gets harder to get the ball closer to the hole. And on top of that, it's not just the ball striking that's affected, but also the putting. The greens have scuff marks that accumulate throughout the day, pitch marks from all the approach shots landing near the hole location, all adds difficulty as the day goes on. So it was a half a stroke difference today. And the more and more I've looked at the weather and the more and more I've considered the slate, I think it's going to be at least that half a stroke difference, with the potential to be closer to 0.75 or even a stroke difference, depending on that rain overnight. Because if it is going to be soft in the morning, so it's going to have, even more of a firming, fasting effect as the day goes on, right? If they get that kind of rain, that's why I think it could be over a half a stroke difference tomorrow. But that is dependent on that weather cooperating. In general, though, these averages are going to be pretty useful for tomorrow, just with the added caveat that you have to consider the wave that the player's going off, because it had a pretty drastic impact on my exposure. In fact, all like the unders, I had a bunch of sleeper slips with guys under 70.5. It was like Glover, Novak, Harman, Akshay Bhatia at 70.5 strokes on sleeper. And we mentioned a few of them yesterday. Didn't make an official slip, but those were absolutely free. AM wave players, Novak was like -3 his whole round. Bhatia was sweat 3. Guys like Harman were -3 at one point. Then he made a couple bogeys to get to -1. He kind of made us sweat it out. Really, the only unders that we had any sort of trouble with in the morning, and they still came through for us, was the Hideki Matsuyama at 69.5. He got to -2 at one point with the eagle, had a couple bogeys to get back to even par. And then that long bomb on his 8th hole, which is his 17th hole, which was hole number 8 on his front 9, was what got us to that -1. But he had been sniffing the lip the entire day. He had been ball striking the shit out of it, just could not buy a putt for his life. So it took that much unlucky putting for us to have any sort of a sweat with a morning wave under. And that, of course, was on an elite tier player. So I haven't looked at the boards quite yet, but I think it's a pretty simple game plan. Try and take some guys to shoot under par in the morning that are elite tier golfers. And then in the afternoon, try and find some slapdicks, maybe some players that even played well today, but got lucky with the short game, maybe gained a bunch of strokes with their shots saying around the green and with their shots gained putting, that could come back down to earth tomorrow, right? Because if you're chipping in everything, you're making all those 30, 40 footers, you're only going to be able to do that so often during a golf tournament. It's hard to go out there and luck sack your way around a golf course that way for multiple rounds in a row. So we can find some PM wave players that aren't setting up the best with the stats, then they could be the kind of guys that would take a stance against. So that's from the weather perspective, I think going to have a rather big impact on how you attack this kind of slate. I do want to see if PGA Tour Comms has posted the pin locations quite yet. So let me bring up Twitter and see what we're cooking with over there, because normally around 9 p.m. they've been posting those. So let's see if they've blessed us. And unfortunately, doesn't look like we have those quite yet. But let's catch up on the chat and see what you guys are doing. You said, you're bad. You said 55 and you called 0.5. I don't know what you're saying, boss man. Love this track, Toe to the Line. Yeah, I love it, man. North Texas golf is rad. It's I love firm and fast golf, especially this time of year. If they played in Florida this time of year, it would also end up being pretty firm and fast. So I just like golf this time of year, man, regardless of where it's at. You're thinking the shots gained bucket hat is a pretty poor number today. So I'm assuming you're saying on Joel Damon and whatnot. Yeah, Joel had the hole-in-one and whatnot, but his shots gained short game, man. He gave away like 5 shots when it came to the around the green and the putting. So I actually think Joel Damon could be a little bit of a sleeper play for tomorrow, just because he missed like a 5-footer for birdie, and then he 3-putted that for a bogey. He had a couple 6-7-footers, then he ended up missing towards his back nine as well. Don't be surprised if he bounces back. It really wouldn't surprise me that much. Let's go through these numbers on here, see what we can find with these projections. Ideally, I kind of want an elite tier guy at 70.5, which based on this, I don't see many players at 70.5 to begin with. In fact, the first one we see is Joel Damon, who does have a super early tee time, but he's far from an elite tier player. So I was maybe getting a little bit wishful thinking when we were looking for those 70.5s. I do have like a Woodland and EVR at 70.5, but we're starting to get towards the PM wave players when we get towards the bottom end of the board here, which, for the most part, I do want to keep these positive stance plays towards the guys going off early, because if we get that overnight drizzle, I mean, these would be massive values. And there's a chance we don't get that overnight drizzle, right? I don't want to just like act like that's a certainty that they're going to get that. The forecasts are all calling for that to come through the area. But if so, even these 69.5s on like a Harris English, I'd have to think like some of the better players like a Siwoo at 70 strokes might be value. And because he's at 70 strokes, I would guess that the sports books like Draftkings, FanDuel are going to have him at 69.5 and juice towards the over. So let's see what they have over here. So let's start with Siwoo Kim. Let's see exactly where they have him priced. So I guess they don't have him on books. So maybe that's why he's up there at 70 strokes. But just to do our line comparison here, Daniel Berger is at 68.5. And I mean, Daniel Berger's the same tier player as Siwoo. Like maybe Berger has slightly better form recently, but Siwoo Kim shouldn't be an entire stroke and a half higher than Berger. And because he is juiced towards the over Berger, minus 165, in fact, they'd probably have him at least 69 strokes on a site like Prize Picks. In fact, if we find Daniel Berger on here, he's probably at 69 strokes. You could see at that kind of a number. But to have a Siwoo Kim an entire stroke higher than that is, I think, a mistake. And you could say the same thing about a Keith Mitchell. Keith Mitchell's been playing much better golf lately. So if we go over here to this tab and type in Keith Mitchell and see what we can find, he also doesn't have a line posted. Maybe that's why DraftKings, or I should say Prize Picks, not DraftKings. DraftKings doesn't have the line posted for either of those two players, but Prize Picks, maybe they're so low on these two guys because of the form today, but bounce backs happen all the time on the PGA Tour. And just because the guy spun his wheels today does not mean it's going to happen tomorrow, especially in the case of a Siwoo Kim who hit a ball out of bounds today. That made his score look a lot worse than it actually was on paper. Keith Mitchell also hit a ball into a hazard today and had to hit out sideways. So without even looking at the shots gained metrics, I can tell you that both of these two guys had a better round than most of you would realize from just looking at the final score. And at that sort of number, I mean, they got to shoot even par to push there. Anything under par would be better. To kind of compare the two, we'll bring them up here and just compare them apples to apples to maybe see which one we're going to end up playing. But if we look at the two of them, and I do want to see what they are in Underdog, if they have either of those two posted. But if we bring up just those two against each other, they're both at +3. To make the cut, they're going to have to shoot 3 under par. So I do wonder about motivation a bit with these two, as they're hot-headed players. When they're outside the cut line, sometimes they eject. But if we get a hot start from either of these two players, then I'd project them well under this 70 sort of number. So I would say the only real kind of risk with these two, or the only reason against playing these two that you could make, would be the fact that they're +3 and they have that fiery kind of mindset. But if they start with any sort of momentum whatsoever, you got amazing value there at 70 strokes. And, even if they don't have their best stuff, these are the sort of players that could make 4 or 5 birdies in a round and it wouldn't surprise you that much. So at even par, even if they are kind of just hitting the ball around, they could still cover that sort of a line. So let's go through a few others on here just to see where else they have the board. So like a Poston, for example, is at 69.5. He's like that same tier player as what you have with those two, and he's -130 for the under. A Harris English is at 69.5, and he's -145 for the under. So like there are other plus EV plays that we could take, because for example, Harris English at that -145 would be pretty decent value, but those 70s might even be better value because they're on that same tier, and like they don't have a Siwoo Kim prop posted over there. So I was trying to see, let's see if they have Keith Mitchell for a strokes line. I'm guessing not, because they don't have the sportsbook lines to compare to over there in Underdog. Underdog usually likes to have those lines before they post anything themselves. But those 70s, like especially a Siwoo Kim, who normally plays well at these shorter, more positional golf courses, is mighty fine tempting. And like, I know what Tom Kim's form lately hasn't been great, but he's going off early and he's there at 70 with that push equity. Like, that is just so nice. And let me see what Tom Kim did today. So he shot even par, a lot more respectable. I mean, Tom Kim cares about making cuts now. He wasn't in the last signature event. He had to play in the Myrtle Beach Classic rather than the Siggy event before the PGA, which I'm sure was an eye-opener for him as a multiple-time tour winner, not being able to get into that kind of field. At T57, he has to shoot even par or better. So I actually think my favorite out of all of these 70s might be the Tom Kim one, just because you don't have that mental factor to worry about as much. Tom Kim is a fiery guy, just like those other two players. Damages the golf course at times when he's not getting his way, but he is closer to the cut line where even if he starts like +1 or something like that, he's going to try and grind it out a bit more. And let's see, did they just take the English one off? They probably ripped that off the board, huh? Just based on what I was seeing there. So no, they ripped somebody else off the board evidently, but the Harris English prop is something that I potentially want to mix in here too. But on Underdog, let's see if they have Tom Kim up here too. I'm guessing not, just based on what we've seen so far. So yeah, no strokes line posted there, but Harris English, let's see if they have him up. So he's there at the 0.9x multiplier. I'm not against taking 2 unders in the morning wave and calling this the slip that we'll take for the stream here, just for the sake of correlation. And I do think it's decent value. Look at that. They just took English off the board. I told you they're listening to the live stream. Oh, I guess high lines makers who are tuning in here on a Thursday afternoon or evening, I guess, depending on where you are in the United States. That's wild that they took that off live. But like this Tom Kim one, these guys at 70, I would argue could be the same, if not even better value than what you have there. And what, did they take all of these off? Is Siwoo off the board as well? If so, like they're literally watching and they're adjusting these live. So yeah, they took Siwoo off. Is Keith off as well? So they still have Keith Mitchell on there. So they could take these two for like the under at 70. But if I think the scoring average is going to be about even par, like, yeah, I'd have to think that like a Tom Kim to Keith Mitchell would be 2 players I'd take to either match that average or to go out there and have a better day. So for the sake of them taking these off, let's take these 2 as the 2 that we're going to play just because they're still on the board. And it's the same idea with all those guys at 70. Like none of them really had the best rounds. I do kind of worry about Keith Mitchell because he's +3, but outside of that one really bad hole, it's the same thing with Siwoo Kim. He made a double on that shot that he hit out of bounds. The ball that Keith hit into the hazard and had to hit backwards, it was essentially like hitting it out of bounds with the kind of shot that he had to hit back. They shot +1 outside of that, and they were on the harder side of the draw today. So let's say on the easier side of the draw, maybe they were a stroke better. That means that outside of that one hole today, they essentially played golf that would have pushed that kind of a line. And that was them playing terribly, right? That was them being +3 outside the cut line and whatnot. You'd have to think an average to even slightly, even below average day is going to push that line once again, with a vast majority of their outcomes going to be the under that you're looking for. So that's why I like these. I mean, I think the under equity is probably close to 40% on these sort of players, if not close to 45, 50%. Reason why I say that, and I might even be conservative with that, is JT Post, and I know the form's better, is -130 under. So that, at least with the pricing that you have there, has them at it slightly over a 50% equity to get to that sort of number. Siwoo Kim, some of those other guys they had at 70, even like these 2, are the same, if not like maybe marginally worse players comparatively. I would say the same level player personally, especially if you look at the long-term stuff. I think a lot of the stats would back that up as well. That's why I think that these are really good values, because you have the push equity on top of what is potentially close to like -130 value towards the under. So that would be where a lot of like the positive stance value would be. Now on the flip side, we do want to look at the PM wave, because as soon as we get to these guys starting in the afternoon, conditions are going to be much tougher. And the reason for that's the course drying out and the winds becoming more of a factor. And the later tee time that you have, the more impacted you're going to be, because that's when the course is truly going to get dry. So like these guys at 70.5 towards the end, like I hate to pick on my guy, Harry Higgs, but like, he might even be a fade at 70.5. A Webb Simpson could be the guy that you might want to look at for a potential fade. Hoffman, he shot +6 today. Like, these sort of guys, like especially like a Hoffman who looked so horrible out there in round number 1, are going to be the guys that I would at least first look to for a fade. Now, what I want to see on here is whether we have some comparisons on these. So let's look at Pot Guider first. So no line for comparison. Who else were we mentioning? So we can do some line shopping. I'm trying to find like a Hoffman. Probably doesn't have a line, but let's see if we can maybe find one on one of these sites. Let's go Hoffman and Webb. Probably not going to have anything posted. So yeah, nothing on Hoffman. See if we have a Webb Simpson line posted. Yeah, nothing for Webb either. So we're going to be in the dark, but that means that the sports books are also going to be in the dark. And I mean, if we think the scoring average, I mean, at least personally, I think it's probably going to play like 70.5, maybe even close to like 70.75 in the afternoon. You can find somebody that you project as an average to even slightly below average player. Like that's where the fade value would be in the afternoon. And, based on course fit, I could see fading a Pot Guider. I could also see fading somebody like a Hayden Buckley at 70, because Hayden Buckley's far from an elite tier player. I mean, this is a guy that's been missing a lot more cuts than he's been making on the tour. And like, just to kind of like be nitpicky about the slip that we're taking here, like if you're going to find my favorite 2 props, it would be this Tom Kim under, because he doesn't have as much like rage and quit risk as the guys that were at +3. And then Hayden Buckley being at the field average, if not even slightly better than the field average, in my opinion, is a little bit of a mistake. And I'm going to bring up Data Golf, and I'm going to bring up his profile real quickly here just to show you guys why I say that's the case. He was decent early in his career. He had like a good rookie season. But ever since then, I mean, look at this. It's a really tough scene outside of the Myrtle Beach Classic. Yeah, the T7, he started okay so far this week, but look at all that dark red. I mean, he had one event where he gained strokes to the field, and that was at Q School, which is impressive because there's a lot of pressure involved with Q School. But the fact that he had to go to Q School to get his card for this year and actually have playing status tells you how terribly he was playing even before that. And then, after getting his card, he went back to playing pretty crap golf over the last 2 to 3 months. So the last month itself has gone T10, cut T7. So it has started to turn around. But the long-term stuff, tells us a lot about Hayden Buckley being about a tour average player, maybe even a slightly below average player if we're using that kind of sample size. And if I've got the scoring average in the afternoon at 70.5 to 70.75, and he's maybe even a slightly below average player, then that could put his projection as high as 71 strokes, if not even a little bit higher than that 71 strokes. So, Buckley could be a stroke value into the positive, whereas Tom Kim, I think, might even be a stroke into the negative, because I have him closer to a 69 stroke projection. So if you take these two together, you do get a 3x payout. I know that you don't have the lines over there in Underdog for these two, so this will be the slip that we take on the prize pick side. I'm going to refresh the board because Underdog is always adding lines to it. So I'm going to make sure that we have all the latest to go out there and compare to. And let's catch up on chat real quick. Where'd we leave off? Oh, I see what you're saying now, Jack. My bad. Yeah, you said 0.55 and you called 0.5. And by the way, my bad with the comments and stuff, like on the timing. Like a lot of times I'm probably not going to know what you guys are talking about, and it's not your fault. It's like I checked the comments after the fact, and then you guys were reacting to something live. So my apologies if that ever happens. A lot of times I'll probably act confused and not realize it until afterwards. But you're right. Yeah, it was like probably going to be about a 0.5 shot difference. I don't always get it that correct though, Jack. Just know that, I try and get it as correct as possible, but it's probably in the minority when I'm going to get it within 5/100ths of a stroke, but we'll take it for sure. Oh, Highsmith. Okay. Yeah, the shots gained bucket hat. So I see what you're kind of saying now. Highsmith, yeah, didn't have the best day either. So I don't know if there's any other bucket hats that struggled, but those two for sure were on the struggle bus. Scotty, is it in his head with the 2 runner-up finishes? I don't know, man. He started off, really well with the -3 through the 2 holes. I think a lot of people were ready to hand him the golf tournament at that stage. And then he played very average golf from that point on. So let's see what happens tomorrow, because tomorrow he's going to have softer greens. One thing I said in the afternoon is that it was getting real crispy out there, and even his good iron shots were ending up like 30 feet from the hole. So what you saw with a lot of the PM guys that played well today, by the way, is they gained a bunch of strokes putting because it was hard to hit the ball to 5 to 10 feet. So they were hitting it to 20, 25 feet. And the guys that made 4 or 5 of those are the ones that shot like -4, -5. So I would say that I think he's got a better shot because his good shots tomorrow morning after the little bit of rain are going to be the 5 to 10 feet again. And he's been putting really good from that portion of the green. So we'll see. I think that there's a good bounce back in him. Killer Keith, not so much. Yeah, he's a +3. Kind of surprising for him. He's normally been a lot better on round number 1. So we'll see. He said McNeely struggled today, sadly. Yeah, not sadly for me. I didn't play him, but I hate to hear that for you, man. There's going to be a lot of struggle buses at this course. It's a tough one. So even the best players, you're going to see some of them struggle. He said, what's the easiest way to contact me? Twitter, I would say. And he said Tinder. I don't use Tinder that much anymore, but Hinge. But don't hit me up there. I have no interest these days in a romantic relationship. Already in one right now. Is Pack fadeable tomorrow? I would say, yeah. I'm fading him in Showdown. He gained a bunch putting. He's not the kind of guy that normally gains a bunch of strokes putting, so I'd stay away from that. And the other aspect is you are not the correct gender either to be hitting me up on Tinder. I believe I have males blocked from even contacting me, so good luck with that. Berger was horrible. He was. I'm playing him in Showdown today. I faded him this week, so another guy, kind of like McNeely, that I'm glad sucked. Like those guys I don't play towards the top that sucked today. I hate to say it. I hate to like dance on their grave, but I am glad I avoided them. I avoided Berger because of the ownership, so that didn't surprise me as much. McNeely, I actually thought about playing, so I was close to going out there and using him myself. I think the people that used Daniel Berger at 20% ownership this week and $10,000, I think it was a little bit of a donkey play. I mean, I tried to warn a lot of people yesterday on my live streams of that, and I'm a huge Daniel Berger guy. He's one of my favorite golfers in the world, but he's only just recently come back to being quote unquote back, and he can't make any putts. I mean, that's been the case for him for like 2 months at this point. So I'm playing him in Showdown. I hope he bounces back because it'd be great for some of my lineups. But like some of those guys towards the top that have struggled so far, you could see it coming on some of them. Like I did say, especially with Daniel Berger. Let's see, thoughts on the Postman after his great round? He made a ton of putts. So he was one of those PM guys that was making those 20 to 30 footers. The thing is with Poston is that he does that. He's one of the best putters on the PGA Tour, gains a half a stroke to about 0.6 strokes per round most years. That puts him in the top 20 normally on tour in the category. If anyone's going to do it back-to-back days, it's that sort of guy that is always towards the top end of the putting list. Like a Denny McCarthy, for example, there are events with Denny McCarthy gains all 4 rounds and gains like 2.5 strokes putting in each round. You won't see that though from John Pock very often. John Pock's more of a ball striking first player. He's a really good iron player, which was why in Showdown, a lot of times he shows up for us, Pock, that is, because he'll lose 1.5 strokes, 2 strokes putting all the time, but gain like 2 or 3 strokes approach. That's not what he did today, right? Today, he got that spike putting round. So Postman, though, maybe has a better chance to reproduce it. I've got him at a 5 out of 10, I would say. I can't really give a hot take in either direction because his round today was very much so on top. Did you miss the prop talk? No, T-Money. What do you think's on this screen right now, my man? Is that a prize picks you see? I don't know. Sorry, I don't mean to grill you too much, but it was a really stupid question. Let's talk through the underdog side of things now. So you already mentioned prize picks, gave like 4 or 5 props that I thought made sense. Of course, guys, for all the exposure I'm entering on sites, you guys can find that on my Patreon page. But over here on the underdog side, they more so have these closer to the sportsbook lines, which sometimes can work in our favor because if we take a look at the sportsbook odds and we try and find some that have juice, like for example, Tommy Fleetwood, he's in the PM wave, so he's maybe not my favorite play for this, but like Jordan Spieth, Fleetwood, if they were in the AM side of things, they're at 69.5 strokes and even money. So if we can find an AM wave player that has the juice in our favor, like maybe we could play it. So let's see where Scotty's at. So Scotty is -130 for the under. I've got to say his -2 round in the afternoon, which was significantly harder conditions than what they're going to have for tomorrow, was about as horribly as he could have played. Like genuinely from hole 3 onwards, that was about as terrible of golf as you're ever going to see from him. So I want to see where they have him on prize picks first. I'm assuming at that same number. So yeah, that -130 juice wasn't enough for them to completely tip it over, but let's try and find an AM wave player to use here in underdog and then potentially another PM wave fade. So they've got Poston at 69.5. Let's see who our other options in the AM wave are going to be. They do have English, but he already has that multiplier on it. So let's see what else we can find before we choose that. Let's look at Griffin. Let's look at Gerard, and then let's look at the Postman too. So Postman, I believe, was -130, but let's double check that first. Yeah, -130 towards the under. Let's look at Ryan Gerard. He is -130 towards the over. And then the other one was Griffin that we wanted to look at. And Ben Griffin is also -130 for the over. So obviously, if you're looking for under plays in the morning, you don't want to take somebody that is -130 towards the over when you have a -130 towards the under that you could take instead. So just trying to find the best line value when we're line shopping here. That would be these two as of right now, both juiced in the right direction. And just based on the strokes lines that they have up, we might want to look at JJ Spawn too, because he is teeing off early. And he is another player that is -130 under. So let's throw those three in there as our potential play that we're going to take for the positive stance. And then for our fades, this is where we might want to get a little bit more creative, because we could take a strokes fade, but a lot of these guys are -130 unders, like we saw with the Jordan Spieth and the Tommy Fleetwood props when we were looking at them a little bit before. But maybe we can find a PM wave birdie line to fade, because I don't think the birdie lines, especially like for the PM wave, like the average, I don't think it's going to be that much over 3. Like the AM side, I could see being over 3 just because of the rain and it not drying up until the wind really starts kicking out there. But let's type in birdies are better. Let's just look at the 3.5s that we have and see if there's a PM wave that we can find with like a -130 under. So I'm not going to take it on Jordan just because he is one of the better players that we have in that PM wave. A lot of multipliers on these. So we might not be able to find it with a birdie or better prop, at least based on what I'm seeing here. Yeah, pretty much all of them have a multiplier in one of the two directions. I guess we might have to make it a strokes line, at least until they post some bogey stuff a little bit later on. But we could fade a green prop for one of these guys in the PM2. And the reason I say that, if you don't even have the averages quite yet, again, we're waiting on Data Golf to update so I can give you guys those kind of averages. They weren't allowing me to download the actual data, or else we'd have that here for the live stream. But in the PM wave, the average at this golf course is usually close to like 10 per round. I would have to think of Hisatune. I've got to look at this one. I have to think Hisatune would be valued towards the under. And they usually don't post these unless they have lines on the books. So he's even money, it looks like, at this 11.5. I don't necessarily agree with that on my guy Ryo Hisatune. And the reason I say that is he's in the PM wave when things are going to start to get a little bit crunchier. And at least to my knowledge. Now, I'm not a big Ryo Hisatune guy. I don't know all of his stats by heart because they're not always posting them here on these prop sites. But let's bring up PGAtour.com and see where he ranks for the year, because at least based on what I've seen this year, I don't think he's elite in the category, but let's double check that. So he's number 55 on tour, which is more respectable than where I thought he was going to come in, but that is still not elite when it comes to hitting greens regulation. If the average is going to be closer to 10.5 per round, there's no way that you put Hisatune at 11.5. Like, it just feels like that's giving him a little bit too much credit. He's kind of a low ball hitter. He's also a guy that goes off on the harder side of tee time. So if the average is like 10.5, 11, the average on the PM side is going to probably be 0.5 lower, 0.25 lower than what you have for the average for the field. Like, if we could find one of these three, they're really taking it. I feel like Scotty might be the best, because Poston made some putts today. JJ Spawn made some putts today too. If you guys look at his shots gained metrics, both of those guys gained over 2 strokes putting. Whereas Scotty Scheffler had the much more pedestrian round, did have the chip in on one. So you do have to give him a little bit of credit for that. He's probably not going to chip in for eagle every round that he plays, but I think he's going to play a much more clean round tomorrow. So Scotty Scheffler under 67.5 was definitely something I wanted to play. And then to get this to a 3.09x payout with this under in Rio is, I think, a very reasonable thing to play. And just to see what they have for the green board over here. So pretty similar pricing, but like, look at this. They have Hideki at 11. Hideki is a better iron player than Rio. I mean, there's just no comparison between those two. Andrew Novak has been a better iron player this year, and he's down there at 11 greens. Like for sure, I think that's value over here. So that'll be the second slip that we take. The first official slip was these two together, under on Tom Kim and then over on Hayden Buckley. And then in terms of our underdog slip, we're going to go with the under on Scotty Scheffler strokes, and then the same thing, an under on greens. But because it's a positive stance play mixed with the negative stance play, you get a little bit over that 3x payout. So always make sure you're doing your line shopping, making sure you're getting the best payout available based on these different prop sites. And at least as of right now, the prop boards are a little bit different from site to site, which I like, right? I like being able to go to different sites, find better lines on my players based on the site that I'm visiting, which makes my job a little bit easier when it comes to handicapping and trying to find some value on these, as I can just kind of like go to the website, find the line that's better, and you're almost automatically getting line value if they're going to be different on a lot of these projections. So I'll catch up on chat, see if there's anything else to go through. The last thing we're going to go through together will be a few matchups. So let me bring up the 3-ball board, and we're going to go through those for tomorrow. But our 3 balls, we're going to try and find some ball strikers going against guys that luck sacked it with the putter. So I've got a few that are kind of coming to mind immediately just based on the research I was doing before. But any other prop bets that you guys want me to deep dive, feel free to go ahead and let me know. But that's essentially it for what we're going to go through. But fairway board, until we get the averages, I'm probably going to hold off on giving my full thoughts there. I do think that the PM would be the side to fade, just like some of these other categories. And then the bogey or worse board, if you're going to try and find a fade like an over for this, of course, look towards the later half players. And then if you're going to take an under on like 2.5 bogeys, that of course would be towards one of like the morning guys. But frankly, I think the best lines that we've seen so far are some of the strokes lines that we've already mixed in. And for example, like the Tom Kim one, and then that Scotty Scheffler at 67.5. So let's catch up on chat and then go through some matchups. Hisatune. Yeah, that's his name, dude. He's got a sick name, by the way. Sick player. But I'll be fading him for tomorrow. The Spawn of Spawn Trusty. He might be a trusty player. I do got to say. That's why I was looking at his under, but I do worry that he was a little short game dependent today. Yeah, in Scotty we trust. I've got to say, man, last year they put out like at least on Prize Fix did this. A lot of the other ones didn't. They put out like a review of your results and like your highest ROI player. Mine was Scotty Scheffler. So like, there's more than just like, yeah, he's value. Yeah, he's world number 1 for playing him. The metrics on him last year had him as like the most profitable player that I used overall. And I can tell you that there was not one single time last year that I faded Scotty Scheffler. So maybe that's the reason for that, right? Like you take world number 1, you play him for positive stance plays, and it works out. Hisatuni has been consistent. You got to give him that. Postman, great play this week, by the way. I'm all for it. Scotty bounce back. Dude, isn't that crazy to say about Scotty, by the way? Like, we're like, oh, he's going to bounce back. And trust me, I said the same thing too, right? It's like, oh, he had a terrible day. He's in the top 20. He's -2. So if that's how high our expectations are for him shooting -3 should be cake, right? He should be like just having an average day. That's why I'm loving that line, man, because you're right. That -2 did feel disappointing. And it was actually a pretty good round compared to the field average. Bobby Mack under fairways. Yeah, let's look at that. Is he at like 8.5 or something? If so, I think you could be cooking there. What is his projection? So I'm guessing he's on Underdog that you're looking at. So let's see where he's at. Bobby Mack, 8.5. So yeah, he's at 8.5, but he's 0.83x for the multiplier. The issue is with Underdog and these multipliers, man, is that they completely ruin the payouts. Like, even if you anti-correlate it with this like 8.5 under, you're still going to be getting like 2.5x for 2x. Maybe you make it like a 3-man card and you can squeeze it out to like 4.7, 4.8x on that sort of a slip. It's just not my favorite thing to do. So I would say the place to do that might be to just play it on sports books. But when you get that 0.83x multiplier, I'm normally fading those kind of things. Yeah, love to degen, man. Amen to that. Completely agree. Still thinking of the big guy here on the streams. When does Sleeper usually post? Usually like an hour or 2 after the other books. So you got to be pretty patient with those guys. Thoughts on Griffin for the over 69.5? Because he's an AM wave guy, man, I would probably say to look to a PM wave guy to fade instead. He played well today, which I honestly don't put that much bearing into with how he's going to play tomorrow. The bigger thing for me is the conditions, because in the morning, I think it's going to play about even par, which means he's still going to have a better than average round to go under. So I don't think you're completely out of reason for taking his under at 69.5. But at the same time, you can find guys at that same number in the PM wave that are the same tier player that are going to be playing on a golf course that's potentially half a stroke to a stroke harder. So that's the side I would go on it. And it's not the player that makes me say that. It's the tee time more than anything. Send a question on X if I have some time. I've got you. But if you have any questions for like props, you can put them down in the chat here. But specific questions, like maybe personal ones, yeah, I'll definitely get back to you if you have them there on Twitter. He said, Bobby Mack is so fun. Yeah, you can play him in Scotland. That's the main thing for him. He said you were sweating Novak round one leader. Ooh, I actually had a few guys for round one leaders while I didn't take Novak because I didn't like the number. I had Hostler, who was -4 at one point. He didn't quite get the job done. And then I had Matt McCarty. He was like 125 to 1 for the first round leader market. Both of them put up a lot of birdies, but yeah, just like Novak, didn't quite get there themselves. I've got to say, -7 by Pack. I don't think a lot of people have given them enough like roses for it. That's an incredible round around Colonial. That's one of the lowest rounds, if not the lowest round that we're going to get this week. Yeah, man, Hogan's Alley. Dude, that's why there's all the golf courses in this area. That's why there's so many good classical designs, is because of the impact the big guy had. So yeah, shout out to Ben Hogan for being an absolute legend. But let's talk about some of these 3 balls. And like I said, I was kind of like thinking about this before, like trying to like do some research on DFS. And I kind of like by chance stumbled into a few of these that kind of made sense. And what I was looking at is like Harris English at +150 versus these two. Siwoo Kim's dealing with the don't give a shit factor because he's +3 kind of outside the cut line. Harris English was like by far my favorite play this week, and Poston did putt over his head today. So I was potentially looking at that. I want it closer to +170 though. So depending on the line that I can get on Hard Rock, maybe I'll end up playing it. +160 is where I'm really going to have to make that decision. But if they're only going to leave it at +150, it might be a stay away for me. So we'll have to see the exact kind of line that I'm going to have available. But let's look at a few of these other 3 balls that might make sense. I'm never going to play Scotty at -160. Should be the favorite, but that's just too much of an asking price. We've got 2 players that can try and knock them off. And I actually think in that 3 ball, maybe the one to play would be a Davis Riley, because last year Riley had 2 nuke rounds in rounds 1 and 2. And today he shot over par. Maybe it's the nerves of being returning champion. But on top of winning in this event last year, he also had a top 5 finish in his 3 starts ago at this golf course. So at +400, like, it's in a 3 ball. Like, I don't think it's out of possibility for him to get there. But depending on the odds on other books, like sometimes FanDuel has better lines available for these guys. Like maybe it's +420, +430 even that you could get on Davis Riley. If you're getting that sort of number, I may actually consider adding that to the portfolio, depending on what Hard Rock posts. Well, let's see. Never going to play Davis Thompson at minus money. In fact, I think the play in that group might be a Phillips at +185, +200 or more, and I would be entering this right now on a Carl Phillips because there's no way that he should be a massive underdog to Davis Thompson, who Thompson isn't even playing all that good of golf. Phillips has been a little volatile, but Phillips has had some top finishes this year. Not even just the win in the alt event, but also some decent top 10s, top 20s in signature field events. Who else do we have on here, though? I don't hate the course history with Kuchar, but yeah, +155 is nowhere near enough, being the second favorite in that kind of group. And you can't even dismiss Nick Hardy because Nick Hardy had really good ball striking stats today and didn't gain with the putter. So I actually kind of like how he sets up in the morning wave tomorrow. A sleeper play in DFS that I will be using in a few lineups. What else do we have? And these slapdick groups, not a lot stands out. I normally look for some of like the long shots when it comes to these lower tier groups, but none of these long shots are really sticking out all that much. Jacob Bridgman really struggled today, and I don't think Sam Stevens had that good of a day either. I do want to double check on Stevens just because I don't know exactly where he ended up. So +2, so also kind of struggled out there. And you got Meissner, who also didn't have his best day. I know the form maybe isn't the best on Mac, but should he be over +200 considering that he had the best score out of those 3 today? I think not. Like, and if I could get +225 or more, I would be taking that immediately. Like, if you're giving me less than a 30% implied win equity, like, I just don't agree with that. I think he's got about 33%, if not higher than that. considering that he had the best form for round number one. Out of this group, Will Gordon at plus 250 might not even be like the worst number. Never going to bet Rio at plus 125. Like, these sports books have got to be crazy if they think anyone's going to hang that sort of a number. He might even win at plus 125. I don't disagree that he should be the favorite, but that's just scam odds if I've ever seen them before. Brian Harman had the best form out of this group, and he's plus 205, and he's a good course fit around this golf course. So, like, I'm not 100% sure I'm going to end up playing all these exact three balls myself. I'm going to have to see what Hard Rock offers. But, like, some of these long shots that had the best rounds of their group today, I don't necessarily agree with what they're doing there. And I know it's only 18 holes. It's only a 1-round sample size. You don't want to overreact too much. But, I mean, it's like they haven't reacted at all to what you saw today. And in some cases, like, in Mac Meister's case, he had the best round out of all three of them. Let's see. Jordan's plus 140. I mean, he's in a group against Tommy Fleetwood. In fact, I hate to bet against my guy Jordan, but it feels like Fleetwood should probably be the favorite over Jordan and a Chris Kirk. But plus 140 is probably about where he should be, I would say, with the odds. They're always taxing with these odds on three balls, as you might imagine. Let's keep going through these. So I like to use this week, but never going to bet them up plus 155. In fact, out of these three, Johnny Vegas at plus 215 with his form lately might be the look there too. And it's not even like he's the best course fit, but he had a top 10 at the PGA Championship. He had a top 10 before that. Like, if I had to pick my favorites out of all of these, it's probably these two. It's probably the Brian Harman with the course fit and him having the best form out of all of those being more than plus 200. And then Johnny Vegas too. He's got really good form. I think he had the worst round I know he had a better round than Hughes actually. But where did he end up? I know Glover -2. Vegas ended up at +1. Should that make him the whole way at plus 215 though? Like, I don't think so. Like, Hughes struggled today. Hughes had a really terrible round, but he's still at plus 155. Why is Johnny Vegas now here the whole way at plus 215? Like, I just don't agree with that sort of an adjustment. So those two will be my favorites that we've seen so far. And let's see if there's any other notable ones that we should really point out. Probably not. Those would probably be the main two that we have here. And I'm going to bring up Hard Rock Bet real quick just to see exactly what I have on these two. And the reason why I wanted to delay on that is Hard Rock Bet is so slow to posting a board that there's a really good chance that they don't even have these posted yet. So I might be shit out of luck in actually entering these until they get them posted a little bit later on. But they do have some of them up. So I'm not sure if every single group has been posted. Let me see if I can find those two. So Vegas is plus 225 on Hard Rock Bet. So in fact, a slightly better number than what I can get there. And then Brian Harman is only plus 180 on Hard Rock. So I'm not going to take the plus 180 on Brian Harman when he's plus 205 on other books. But the plus 225 on Johnny Vegas, I think is a rather good play. So I'm going to put a whole unit on that Johnny Vegas prop at plus 225, which is maybe even a little bit bigger than I normally put on a plus 225, but it's value compared to DraftKings. In fact, I guess let's look at FanDuel. FanDuel normally has the better odds between a lot of these larger sports books. So if they have them at plus 225, they probably have them at plus 225 over here. But let's just confirm that and not take a guess. So he is actually only plus 210 on FanDuel. So yeah, the best line you can get right now is on Hard Rock Bet if you guys have access to that sports book. Johnny Vegas would be my favorite. And then let's see where they have Brian Harman just for shits and gigs. So Brian Harman is plus 210 over here. So yeah, that's going to be a stay away for me at the plus 180 mark then, just because it's a whole like 30 points, 25 points off the rest of the market. If he ends up drifting to plus 205, plus 210, then maybe I consider adding that to the mix. But who were a few of the other ones? Let's see what I can line shop on some of those other groups that kind of made sense. Let's see. So let's find Meissner versus the Stevens Bridgman. I'm going to need a pretty good number on Meissner for me to actually fire on this one, just because the only reasoning for me entering it is the number itself. I don't necessarily like Meissner tomorrow, to be frank. It's not like he really showed up in my process. He's only plus 200 on Hard Rock, so that's definitely going to be a stay away. Just like I said, it's all about the number on that sort of bet for me. And let's look at the other ones that we had, just to remind myself. That's right, it was Phillips. That's versus Thompson and Malnati. And they have no way to search this, by the way. on Hard Rock Bet. That's another thing I like to complain about with their book, is that it makes it kind of hard to find these. He is at plus 185, so he's at the same number that they have on DraftKings. But I do want to see what they have him at on FanDuel, just to make sure we're not getting a terrible number. So it's the same plus 185 that you can get at all these different sports books. So we'll leave that one in the shopping cart. We'll at least half consider entering that one. And then what was the other one that we were looking at? Not there. Wasn't one of those ones. I don't think it was English. No. Should have just left them all in here. It would have made my life a whole lot easier. All right. Let's just leave it with the Johnny Vegas one that I'm for sure playing. I'm going to do a little bit more research into this Carl Phillips one. If it was obvious value, let's say I was able to get like plus 200 when he was plus 185, plus 180 everywhere else, I would have jumped the gun and entered that one as well. But I'm going to do a little bit more due diligence on some of these 3-ball bets before I end up adding any other ones into the mix. But for all the exposure I'm entering, guys, you can find that on my Patreon page on top of these prize picks and the underdog slips that we went through here together. On top of that 3-ball bet with Johnny Vegas that I've already entered into the mix, you guys can find every single piece of exposure that I'm entering over there on the Patreon. And on there, I'm posting not only every single slip as I get to them, but also the averages for any given round, also weather reports for every single day of action as well, to give you guys every single piece of research that you need for your exposure to have yourself a day. And it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily tail every piece of exposure I put out. There are plenty of people that do and that are very satisfied with our results over the last few months. But the main goal of my Patreon page, and especially the prop side that I have here, is to make you a better of golf, to teach you guys what to look for in players, help you originate your own plays, break down pin locations, break down the setup for a golf course, all that kind of fun stuff, and get an idea of exactly how to find value. Because, there are tout sites like mine out there, some of which, maybe not even be profitable, that you have out there in the industry. Mine is, right? Obviously, I vet all my plays. I'm very transparent, very public about my results and all of that. I think everyone should be that's doing this kind of service themselves. But I like to kind of teach people how to find their plays so that they don't have to pay for these kind of tout services, right? And I know it's ironic saying that coming from somebody like myself, but you'll truly see that my process is not just, here are plays that I like, take them, right? That's not at all what you're going to get from my process. Like you heard with all the plays that we've gone through here, there's a big thought process behind it. I share all of that with my followers. And some people might find that silly, like quote unquote, giving away your edge. But I'm okay with that because you can still find value against these sports books, right? Just because I've quote unquote given away my edge to some people, the sports books haven't caught on to it quite yet. They still misprice the board every single slate. And there's a reason for that. You still have to be able to break down a golf course, and handicapping conditions, handicapping pin locations, all that sort of stuff is a skill. And frankly, a skill that a lot of these lines makers don't have down pat. And a lot of niche markets like NFL markets, basketball markets for like player props and stuff have been broken down because they have a lot better models for them. They have whole teams that are working on them. These golf markets, though, these lines makers don't put in all the work that you see here on these live streams. You don't see them completely breaking down these pins, stat averages, scoring averages to these pins like a lot of handicappers do. And that's where you can still find an edge, because you can use that traditional analysis, handicapping a golf course, add on top of it plus EV value, so trying to find line shopping compared to the other sports books that are available. And if you combine those two facets, that's what I'm all about when it comes to my Patreon page. That's where you get the hotspot and where you can really have yourself long-term results. I used to be a big correlation guy, so that used to be like the third pronged part of my process. I would just jam correlation across the board, because back in the day, they used to give you no multiplier difference. They're just going out there and taking all props in the same direction. So why the hell wouldn't we go out there and only jam in like 4 or 5 leg slips with guys that are all unders on strokes, or all guys that are like all overs on birdies? But even since then, we still have those other 2 prongs to work with that have given us quite a bit of success. So if you guys want to join the Patreon page, you guys can find it in the description of this live stream. Patreon page is Gsluke DFS if you just want to search me on Patreon itself. And the prop tier is what you want to join if you want all the underdog and prize pick stuff. All the matchups and 3 balls, by the way, that I do, I throw in the Discord channel. But prop tier is how you get all of these slips delivered to you. And it's only $15 a month for everything that I offer on there. And it's all the slips as I go out there and enter them. So check out that. The DFS tier also has my DFS projections posted. And just because I know some people maybe don't see the live streams I do over there on Ship It Nation every single time, just to remind you, I am still doing all my showdown stuff for all my people on Patreon as well. So this is the showdown sheet for round number 2. It has all my projected ownership on it, projected fantasy points for showdown, and my entire player pool. And what people really like about my Patreon page when it comes to the showdown stuff is not only do I give you guys a player pool, but I also show exactly why I'm on each single play. So you can see this says Y/CH. Here it says Y/SG. You may go, what the hell does that mean? Well, that's why there's a little bit of a legend to the right. And you can see SG is a short game regression candidate, i.e. somebody that has really sucked around the arena with the putter and is due to kind of come back to earth a little bit and in a good way. Right? If they lost a whole bunch of strokes, it means that they're probably going to be close to neutral, if not positive. And then the CH that you saw with Scotty Scheffler are guys with good course history. And with Scotty, he's finished in second or third here like the last 2 or 3 years at Colonial Country Club. So you're going to be hard pressed to find somebody that has better success around here. And just to give you guys like another play that I'm using, like I'm using Davis Riley as a little bit of a bounce back in the AM wave. And he's another guy that is a good course history player around this kind of a golf course. So not only for all the projections that I'm using for these slates, you can find those over there, whether it's ownership and points, which are adjusted for showdown. They're not just copy and pasted like a lot of these other sites do for their rounds 2 through 4, all completely customized out for the next round using shots gained metrics, etc., to try and optimize the projections and all the player pool tags over there too. So DFS stuff. So this is for fantasy. That's the DFS tier over there on my page. Just like the prop tier, it is $15 a month to join the DFS tier. But if you're somebody that plays both, so you play fantasy and you have prop stuff, the combined golf tier is what you want for that, because that way you get all the prop stuff for Underdog and Prize Picks and all the showdown and main slate stuff that I'm doing for fantasy. But that's all I've got, guys. Going to go ahead, bring up the prop board one last time and go through any last second questions that you've got. So anything that we haven't touched on to this point, go ahead and let me know, because we're going to hop on out of here in about 5 minutes. Anyone I like in the late wave tomorrow? So yeah, I would go with fades, I'd say, for the most part. And let me know if there's any other matchups that you want me to look at, man. But I really like that Vegas one. And like in the PM wave, look at some overs on strokes would be my main thing. Vegas was 215, you would think. Would I play Harman at 210? I would play him at 210. If I could get that number, I would for sure play it. You said you're running over to sign up now. I appreciate that, Yahtzee. Not only will it give you all that content that I was mentioning, but it supports the channel as well. And that's usually something that I fail to mention on these, but it is a big part of it too. It helps me do this content for you guys, right? Give you guys, be able to put all the time in that's necessary to break down slates like this, do projections, especially on the fantasy side. It's a rather intensive process, as you guys could imagine. So it helps out with that, gives you all that extra information. It's a win-win across the board. So I just want to say I truly appreciate your support. And yeah, thank you for joining on in if you do. Nico is -1 on the par threes. He said Phillips is the best at -2. Yeah, by the way, if you guys didn't catch Jordan yesterday, he gave a shout on Nico Echeverria, best par 3 scorer this week. And I think he's 1 shot off the lead is what you're saying there. So that's good stuff, man. And it was a really sharp play. That's why I want to give him his flowers on that. Even if it doesn't hit Jordan, all right, I want to give you your flowers on it because he's one of the top 5 par 3 scorers. He's a really good player recently with his iron play, good bent grass putter. I'm all for that, man. Thanks for the stream, of course. He said, more shots gained metrics if I have time. Yeah, I got you. For sure, man. And by the way, if you have questions about shots gained metrics, I'll definitely go through them. Just let me know the purpose for it, right? That's why I was giving you a slight hard time before. My apologies if that came off the wrong way. But he gained off the tee, lost on approach, and then kind of luck sacked it with the short game. It's not the best stat profile, just to kind of like shoot you straight with it. I'd rather him be gaining a stroke or 2 on approach and then losing maybe the strokes with the short game. And it was the opposite, right? He was the worst in the most important category, that being shots gained approach. Does this mean it's a death sentence, though? Does it mean that he can't have a good round 2? No, it's just that maybe in terms of the shots gained profile is like a 4 out of 10. But, you know, the idea for playing a Taylor Moore tomorrow, really in any capacity, is that he's a hot putter and he's a very aggressive player. So from a showdown perspective, when Taylor Moore has his good rounds, he normally makes like 6 or 7 birdies in them. So I kind of like him in the showdown format in general. Not to say that I'll be using him personally tomorrow. I'm not in my player pool, but he is somebody that I normally look to for leverage at times just because of that high volatility, which can work to his detriment at times in terms of making a lot of bogeys, but it also means that you're aggressive and you're going after pins and are capable of posting 6 to 7 birdies plus, because there are plenty of players in the field this week and in a lot of fields in golf that aren't capable really of making 6, 7 birdies unless they're gaining 5 strokes putting, because they're more conservative. They're taking conservative targets towards the center of the green, and it's a lot of putts that they have from 30 feet. The exact opposite of that is a Taylor Moore, or another example would be a Siwoo Kim that takes aim at every single pin. When Siwoo Kim has a good day, he's going to have a bunch of birdie looks because he takes on every single pin location. So I would say, like in a GPP format for Showdown, you might want to consider Taylor Moore. I wouldn't take him in props though. So like if you're looking at like a strokes line, maybe like that sort of thing, I'd probably avoid it because of the fact that he was a little short game dependent. But in the right format, he can be used. He said, "Thanks, Luke. You're the GOAT, hardest worker in the space." I appreciate that, man. I take pride in working hard, so I appreciate the kind words there. He said, "Let's slip a little bourbon tomorrow night." Yeah, man. We will tomorrow night. Not tonight. Still keeping it easy as it's a Thursday. You kind of know that with me, right? I keep it easy until the weekend, but tomorrow we'll have some fun. He said, "You saw the data golf data was just made available." Sweet. So as soon as I get off live stream here, I'll be able to run those for you guys, which will help me out with being able to add some props for that on my Patreon page. So let's do that. And he said, "Sleepers, wait until I get off the live stream." That's okay. It's most of the time we usually post those on the Patreon page anyways, because I can't bring them up here. Dude, that's the one thing about Sleeper that sucks. And maybe Sleeper, if you're watching this, because I know the Prize Picks guys were watching with how they were just ripping shit off the board. It cracks me up when that happens, by the way. It's happened a lot before, though, so I can't say it's that surprising. But if you're watching Sleeper, just post the board, please. And please make a web version so that we can bring it up here in the live stream, because I promise you, if I can show off your product, if I could show off the lines and show them off on this stream, more people will play your website, Sleeper. So they're probably not watching. It's probably a pipe dream saying that, but I guess you never know. But that's all I've got, guys. I appreciate your support here on the channel. If you haven't already smashed that like button, go ahead and do so. And also subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already, so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. That'll, of course, will include our round 3 and 4 live streams, which will be doing the same thing that we did here for the weekend's action. And for my fantasy live streams, I know I was giving my guy Jack a little bit of a hard time before. Fantasy stuff, though, make sure to check out the Ship It Nation YouTube channel. We had an hour live stream earlier tonight, completely breaking down the fantasy board. Ship It Nation has some great tools for fantasy themselves, but of course, like I was saying a little bit earlier, my website still has the Showdown stuff on it too. And I love the Ship It stuff, but I'll just say it, my stuff's better when it comes to the Showdown. I'm always partial to that. I will always like myself more than any other site. That is just human nature, right? Let's just say that, right? Even if my stuff wasn't the best, I'm always going to say it's the best. That's just everyone out there is going to say that, but my stuff truly is the best. We've done the back testing on it when it comes to the ownership projections. We've done the back testing on it when it comes to my player poll. People have found a ton of success when it comes to following my stuff on the Showdown. So make sure to check out all of that stuff as well. But that's all I've got, guys. Appreciate you. I'll catch you guys for rounds 3 and 4.